Christmas, a pagan, German, and Roman culture adopted by America, whose origins can be traced back to Siberia. Siberia is located in the far eastern part of Russia, and the reindeer herders and their magic mushroom shamans call Siberia their home. The shamans gather the amanita mushroom that grow underneath the spruce or pine trees and deliver them to the locals on Christmas morning by reindeer. The reindeer, also known as caribou to the Northern Americans, eat these psychedelic infused mushrooms called the amanita mushroom and are often seen sniffing or smelling the mushrooms. And this will explain the theory of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, a 1949 song and Christmas hymn sung where it's known that Rudolph is the red-nosed reindeer that leads the reindeer bunch, okay? And so these caribou in Siberia mountains, the shamans call them their spirit animals, and the shaman mimic the same color clothes that the Amanita muscaria has, the red and white colors. So the shaman can often be found wearing the red and white colors, the same as the mushroom. And these shamans will go ahead and deliver these mushrooms in extreme harsh winter conditions. And Siberia is known for having really long winters and just unnatural cold temperatures, oftentimes reaching 30 degrees below zero. And oftentimes the snow covers the doorways of the chum, the CHUM, or the teepee-like homes that the villagers dwell within. And when the shaman would go to deliver these mushrooms on Christmas morning to the villagers, they would find that snow was blocking them from entering into the doorway. So the shamans would enter through the roofs of these teepees. And this is the inspiration behind Santa entering through the roofs of Americans. The snowfalls in Siberia were so high, it's well known in their tradition that these Siberian tribe folks would definitely come down this shaft, okay? And these Arctic shamans, they came to barter and give out the amanita mushroom during the winter solstice. They carried these bags full of hallucinogenic mushrooms, and they often called them presents for the villagers. Now, these ancient priests excited all of the Christmas traditions that we have here in America, not St. Nicholas as we were taught. So the amanita is found under the spruce or the pine tree. And the same is true for the gifts or presents that we Americans place under our Christmas trees, and we put gifts, oftentimes mimicking the red and white colors for family members. So billions of Americans bring these pine trees into their homes during the winter solstice. But there's a secret magical history tied to this magical mushroom. And so the amanita mushroom, most of the shamans were actually on this hallucinated substance when they would go make their deliveries, their trips. And when they would do these deliveries, the distances that they would travel were very long distances, but would go by rather quickly when they were under the influence of the amanita mushroom. And that's where the term from the flying reindeer came to our particular traditions here in America. In fact, we still use that saying many times a day. You can probably hear somebody that you know or oftentimes yourself say, wow, man, time flies. And so that comes from the shaman priests as well. So also Scandinavian shamans practice the same exact rituals as well. And, we basically adopted the Arctic shamans' traditions, okay? And Also, another point I want to talk about is the shaman and the reindeer. When they would reach these long distances and arrive at the villagers' homes, the shaman and the reindeer would produce urine for the villagers, and the villagers would ingest this urine. I know we think it's gross, but that was what was in, their tradition. And their tradition, it's thought that the harmful chemicals that are present in the Amanita mushroom were broken down and considered to be safe, and were actually welcomed by those, who considered themselves blessed enough to have the shaman arrive. And in tradition, this is where we get the hot apple cider. Drinking hot apple cider on Christmas is also an American tradition as well. Okay, so people who understand shamanism accept these stories, and the one who's unable to understand will not believe. This is a saying often mimicked by these ancient priests or shamans, okay? And if you take a look at the Christmas cards dating back, there are German vintage type dwarfs that are on the surface. But there's a secret to these Christmas elves, and they have a Germanic tradition and origin about them. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the tiny dwarf creatures before we go ahead and talk about the occultic roots of the mushroom within the churches. Okay, so these tiny dwarf creatures can be male or female. They're youthful, immortal creatures and are said to have magical powers and can actually control what you see, what you hear, and even the experiences that you have when you're in the presence of them. The abodes are said to be underground of these tiny dwarfs, in forests, wells, or springs, but no one knows exactly where they live at because the exact locations of their residences are kept top secret. Okay, and it's also believed that on January 6th, the last day of Christmas, that these dwarfs would actually light their torches and come out of their secret villages to play in hidden fields, fountain valleys, and celebrate and drink with each other and engage in games and play with the locals in their communities, especially children. Okay, and they would also promote these magical hallucinogenic mushrooms as well. Okay, and often they could be seen with fairies and beetles because it's said that the dwarfs are able to shapeshift into fairies or beetles. Now, not only in art are these psychedelic experiences of these dwarfs or gnomes, as they're called in Scandinavia, they call them gnomes, and here in America we call them elves. They speak to the naughty or nice version of the Santa tales that we have here in America. And so before I tell you about the behavior of the gnomes, let's talk about the different species of gnomes that are present, okay? So you could also find some of the gnomes on board ships, and these were called ship gnomes, okay? You could find them by the water, and these were called sauna gnomes. Then you have garden gnomes, which are very popular. You see a lot of garden gnome statues here in America, and they would ensure, the safe and beautiful growth of flowers and things of that nature that people grow in their gardens. Then you have barn gnomes, and they protect and feed and just care for the animals in the barn. You also have farm gnomes that ensure the safety of crops, okay? And then lastly, we have house gnomes, which is very popular in Scandinavia. And when it comes to the tales of Santa, the perception are that the gnomes and their behavior towards the villagers depended largely upon the people that they cared for. So in the mid 1800s, the true purpose of gnomes was revealed by the Scandinavian shamans, or Father Christmas, Santa Claus, they would call the shamans. So they said that the gnomes prepared the gifts for delivery, meaning the magic mushroom. In America, we think of them as preparing toys to deliver to children. So, but if the house gnomes are left treats and porridge and fruit by homeowners, they would receive a large delivery of the Amanita mushroom, and oftentimes would find that they were visited first before other villagers. Ensuring that children are obeying their parents was another one of their jobs, and not misbehaving, or just plain old being unkind was what they would ensure. So in other words, they acted as the shaman's secret agents, okay? But they could be tricksters and would often leave lumps of hot coal inside of socks. And these socks were extended over fire to dry out Amanita mushrooms, and they would often leave these socks out for, the delivery of mushrooms as well, okay? But sometimes they would leave bundles of twigs, okay, or hot coal, as I said, if you were treated, or if they felt that they were treated unkind by humans, okay? So again, the humanoid little creatures treat you nice depending on if they believe that you are a good person or an evil person, okay? Now I want to talk about the gentleman Albert Hoffman, who actually isolated the Amanita mushroom and, LSD, and began to actually market this particular hallucinogenic on a very large scale, LSD, okay? He was considered to be the father of LSD. He was a chemist that was born on January 11th, 1906, and he also was in the military at the time he discovered the mushroom compounds psilocybin and LSD. He was the first person within our 19th century to learn about the isolated effects of lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD, as it's commonly called, or acid, which is its street name. So when people are induced with LSD, they begin to see a reality that's normally suppressed from our perception. But one starts to have an ego dissolution, as is described during many landmark research studies, that the connectivity networks in the brain begin to show signs of activity, including the visual cortex, which normally receives its information from when the eyes are actually open. So it's said that no one is able to see into the astral realm or the higher dimensional planes. And the same is the case for the Amanita muscaria, when research and not only the studies, but people come forward and talk about their astral realm abilities to see into the future and that sort of thing. Now, let us take a look at the mushroom as it appears in Christianity or Catholicism, okay? And I want to examine exactly what this means and why the mushrooms are present within the church, okay? So what you're taking a look at are simply in the illustrated texts on stained glass windows, the mystery religions, the mystery cults, or the sacred mysteries are taught. These secrets we're about to delve into, these are mystery school teachings, okay, and they're reserved for special initiates at their ritual practices. And they don't like to reveal the truth to outsiders. So, but these mystery schools have been present since Greek and Roman antiquity, or the Dark Ages, since the 4th century, or the Mithras, okay? So it's also referred to as fertility cults as well, okay? So these Catholic priests represent OHM, or Order of the Hidden Masters. And the personification of a priest, or the Latin rites, they mimic the clothing of a mushroom as well. And we will see as we look ahead that the Catholic priests literally worship these mushrooms as Christ. Okay? Now, this may sound strange if this is your first time hearing about this secret, but this is actually what's happening. And before we move forward, let me read a direct quote from the initiates, which they recite, keeping the secret amongst those within the order, okay? And it will kind of explain the revelations of what they worship, okay? And this is a quote. It says, "Let no stranger anywhere have knowledge of it. Do not speak about it to any man. Do not repeat it. Let no eye or outsider see it. Let no other ear hear it. Let no one see it except for thyself and him who taught it to thee. Let not the multitude know of it except for thyself and the beloved friend of thy heart." End quote. Okay? And that text was written on the papyrus. So the papyrus is not a person, it's a plant. And this plant, they wrote words on this plant in ancient Egypt. So this comes from an ancient book of the dead. The papyrus is what they use to write their materials or their notes, etc. on. Okay? So now let's talk about for a moment the German shepherd, or the actual priest, okay, the Catholic priest. They have sacred knowledge, and they keep this knowledge, and they do not want us, the masses, to be transformed into purposeful beings. So they have managed to hide this in plain sight, okay? And let's talk about the Holy Grail, which is also the magical Amanita mushroom, okay? I'm going to talk about that. Now, they taught the masses that the manna was God, all right? But we'll soon learn in the mystery schools, they teach that the true manna was actually the Amanita muscaria, okay? And the very fungi that allowed you to go into the very realm where God exists and sit with him and convene with him. And the mushroom is the vehicle that can propel one to the very throne of God. And to understand this, we must examine the tree of good and evil, because the tree of good and evil was also a huge misleading representation as well. It was not that of an apple, but rather that of a mushroom that was forbidden. And the psychedelic mushroom is still forbidden today. Okay, so we can go and buy apples by the dozen, but the same cannot be said for the fly agaric mushroom. They do not want us to be able to, have that, as it is against the law to have a muscaria mushroom. Okay, so again, I wanted for us to be able to take a look at the mushroom as it grows, because this is really important, okay? So the ancient teachers would watch these mushrooms very closely, and they saw that it was the androgynous plant, meaning that it is both male and female. So the mushroom begins as a spore, and the spores, they can't be seen with the naked eye, but when the spores form their clusters, they look just like an eyeball. And the spore of the mushroom then turns into a seed, okay? And no man, no woman has to plant the mushroom, the Amanita mushroom. It forms all by itself. And then the phallic, or the stick of the mushroom, is what fertilizes the spores. And even if several feet away, the mushroom phallic is still attaching itself to the root of the tree. And the tree and the mushroom have a healthy, long relationship. So the mushroom cannot live without the tree, and the tree cannot live without the mushroom. Okay? And many of us witness replanted mushrooms in our community. I'm not speaking about those trees. I'm speaking about the sacred trees that haven't been tampered with and they grow in nature. Okay? The tree feeds the mushroom nutrients and the mushroom feeds the tree nutrients. So they live in harmony. They have like a really long, healthy relationship with one another. Okay? So at this point, the mushroom goes through its egg stage, and there'll be a white egg present until such time where you'll start to see a red cap piercing through the veil. And it's actually called the universal veil. So this is broken. The universal veil covers the entire mushroom, and the white speckles on the amanita, or the veil remnants, is what you see at the leftover portions. Okay, so the male stages begin after that, where the phallic then becomes present and obvious as it stands erect, and it would just get stronger by the day, as it's neutralized. Okay, so this veil is actually called, as I said, the universal veil, and it continues to grow and stretch. And as it tears, the mushroom is then circumcised. So that's the mushroom circumcision. And then as the cap grows and the veil falls from the phallic, then we will start to see a skirt develop around the mushroom. And then next we have the cap expansion. And what happens there is the cap flattens itself, turning into a round table. Now let us keep in mind that the Knights of the Round Table, or the Templars, are also the keepers of the Holy Grail. And the cap is actually called the Holy Grail. So the next stage is the Grail, or the cup stage. The cap continues to grow upward, and then a cap or a cup is then visible at this stage. And this cup holds the morning rainfall. So when the morning dew falls, the water is now a bright red color, often called the blood of the mushroom, or blood of Christ. And when this happens, the mushroom color begins to fade into a golden orange color. So drinking the holy blood of Christ is what the mystery teachings say is happening during this particular ritual. Okay? Now, these sacred teachings I want to go into and show you what or tell you I'd actually like to show and tell you what the hidden masters believe and exactly what it is that they teach. Okay? So, the last stage of the mushroom is considered to be the phoenix. So in Greek mythology, a bird is seen within the Harry Potter series, but in mycology, the study of mushrooms, this sacred mushroom, if it is not utilized and stays in its place, it becomes reminiscent of the phoenix bird. Now this bird is first noticed and mostly associated with ancient Egyptians and Greek mythology, okay? And it's associated with the sun. But moreover, like the Amanita, the phoenix obtains new life by rising from the ashes of the predecessor or bird that was there before. Now, when an Amanita and a phoenix dies, it's immediately born again. And this is where the term born again Christian is derived from. So in other words, much like the spirits of human, the Amanita mushroom and the phoenix bird never dies. And so we, like it, are immortal without even realizing it, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more in depth regarding the fact that the Amanita mushroom also glows in the dark and is called the fire mushroom. And it's called the fire mushroom because it contains Lucifer rays, okay? And they say that the phoenix bird also contains Lucifer rays, but they say the phoenix bird is a myth and it's only creations of the ascended masters. And they say that, it is a very real bird, even though it only exists in higher dimensions. Okay. So, but who knows, right? So as I said, we'll discuss that a little bit further as we go along, but for now, let's take a closer look at the thuribles used to hold incense in the Catholic Church and the halo representation that can be seen in the Christian art. Okay, now this halo is said to be a symbol of divine sanction of authority and can even be seen in Buddhism and Hinduism as well. Okay, so, but either way it goes, we can always see the halos over the heads of, the priests or the ascended masters inside of the art. And they've always taught us that that was the sun. The sun was what we saw glowing over the heads of these gods or these goddesses. All right. But what you'll see coming up here shortly, and I couldn't help but to notice, was a symbol that was hanging over the face of a woman in a confessional booth. Okay, so we'll take a look at that deeper as the picture comes along. And this symbol is reminiscent of the Monster Energy drink logo. Okay, the claw marks on the Monster Energy drink logo and the Finger Lake, New York regional map, if you will, and its symbolic importance is, that a lot of things go on there as it relates to children. And also Hunter Biden has a tattoo of the Finger Lakes region as well. So I mean, the level of secrets in America and cover-ups are outright pathetic. These elite have been holding back the lock and key and chains to our consciousness to blind humanity from the truth. Okay, and they hide these despicable acts right in our face. Okay, and then they live in them, and then they live for them. Meanwhile, they structure these crafty religions for us, right, and keep us from attaining divinity. So we're supposed to have life and have it abundantly. Instead, they taught mankind to stay on a path, on a pursuit for happiness. So already they have wrote the code for our subconscious by telling us that we are not happy, but rather we should be pursuing this blissful feeling of happiness. Okay, so they've governed this matrix for far too long, and it seems that as a prerequisite to govern, one must be skilled at making certain that there is never a bridge between the created gap of spirituality and consciousness. And it is a time of the revealing where all of these things are becoming visible to us. Okay, the Catholic Church recognizes these things and they teach these secrets in their mystery schools. So let me go into talk about a little bit about the curriculum that the initiates learn inside of these mystery schools, if I can. Okay, but first let me just say that there are 600 species of the agaric mushroom, and the Buddha himself or herself, the androgynous god, it's widely debated but strongly believed that the Buddha's death was the result of eating a bowl of wild mushrooms. Okay, the Amanita mushroom, and the Amanita muscaria, was very familiar to the Buddha. He was 80 years old when he had reached his death, and he had, reached attainment or enlightenment long before his death, and he passed away 483 BC. Okay, so although it's said that he was 100 and considered to be, a century when he passed away, but he did live a purposeful life. So, in other words, it's said that he may have stopped his own breathing by himself. Okay, so stopped his own breathing, unalived himself, purposefully. But who knows? Okay. So, we don't need any monks or scholars or Buddhists coming onto this video saying that's not right, this happened or that happened. I'm just going on a side note of what I had found during my research. Okay, so I do agree a lot, though, if I can say, I do agree a lot with the Buddha teaches, about dharma, wisdom, kindness, generosity, patience, compassion. All of those things are important, and I also believe in the karma law, of cause and effect of your actions. So I do believe a lot of what he does teach, although I do not worship the Buddha. I do not know his teachings inside and out. Okay, so but I just want to talk a little bit further because it is intriguing that the Buddha is shown oftentimes sitting on an open lotus flower, and also holds in one of his hands the lotus, which is the symbol of purity. Okay, the blue lotus flower is a symbol of purity, and it's used today primarily as a sleep aid or anxiety reliever. However, at higher doses, that you can achieve by inhaling, the user can experience euphoria, hallucination effects, much like the Amanita mushroom. Okay, so the blue lotus contains albomorphine, alkaloids, and muscarafine. Okay, and the Book of the Dead teaches that lotuses have the ability to actually resurrect the dead. Okay, the Book of the Dead teaches that. Okay, so it's a sweet plant, and it's said to capture those who, come into eating the plant, where men would literally forget their cares, never to return to their homes or the world that they once knew. Okay, and I don't want to make light of this video because it very much is an important video, but if you take any sort of drug or stimulants and you forget about your home life, that sounds a lot like the crack epidemic that they put in America in the 80s. So that must be a really powerful blue lotus flower. Okay, also there's another mushroom called the soma. Okay, the soma is a very much important, that's actually called the god mushroom. Okay, the soma mushroom, and it's an ancient mushroom of immortality. Okay, and this is described in the Rig Veda about this mushroom and how it's used in its religious ceremonies. And we call the same mushroom the Amanita muscaria, but all over the world, even in Africa, because the soil is very enriched in the mushrooms in Africa, so things grow a lot bigger there. You can find these psychoactive mushrooms. Okay, now let us just talk about the holy cow if we can. Okay, so the holy cow itself is said to be sacred. Okay, and in Hinduism they worship this animal, believing that it is Mother Earth. Okay, so they believe that the cow is the source of goodness. Okay, because it has milk that nourishes the world and the world's infants. Okay, and also they have a god named Krishna, who's a deity and is represented with a cow head. Okay, so the cow is very important to the Hindu traditions, where they do not believe that a cow should ever be violated or killed. And I remember here in America that we had a time where the cows were being violated. I mean, they would take their tongues, they would take their organs, and they would, farmers would find their cows laying with no blood and no internal organs. And to this day, this has been happening since the 70s, but I can remember it being prevalent here in America more recently, the past couple of years. years ago, and no one could ever figure out why this was happening to the cows. And as I did study for this particular video, I thought to myself, I says, wow, well, the cow, you know the cow's manure produces mushrooms. Maybe they want to understand the internal workings of the cow. I don't know. But in any event, also I wanted to talk about the Amanita mushrooms and its many species, okay? I said that I would talk a little bit more in depth about the fact that the Amanita mushroom does indeed glow in the dark, and it glows in the dark with various beautiful colors, okay? So it could be seen as a burning forest, okay, or a burning mushroom when these mushrooms are lit up with the bioluminescent Lucifer rays that they do contain. Okay, and I thought that this was quite interesting because it made me think about Moses, okay, and the burning bush, okay. It made me think that Moses perhaps could have seen the burning Amanita mushroom under the bush, and I do believe that he still was, invited to, convene with the creator as well. But during this research, I also learned that a lot of people or scholars have said that Moses could have been under psychedelic influences of the Amanita mushroom when he did encounter God at the burning bush. So that's something that is quite interesting, and you can look into when you get a chance. And I just wanted to read off a little bit of information about the Order of the Hidden Masters and exactly what it is that they teach, okay? The Order of Hidden Masters, this particular location is located in 10 York Place in Edinburgh, UK, okay? And I just wanted to go over, because just recently they have posted a manifesto, okay, about their Supreme Inner Council, their beliefs, their Grand Masters, and I just wanted to read off a little bit about what it is that they taught, okay? So it says here that I skipped out a lot, so you can go and look up the Order of Hidden Masters on your own to get a full, the full read of the manifesto. But it says the order is divided into 3 groups. The first is the outer circle, consisting of 3 grades. It takes 3 years to master the teachings of these grades, and the work may be compared to a university course of study in philosophy, natural and occult laws and science, higher ethics, and metaphysics. The order is non-sectarian and open to sincere students of both sexes. However, whatever nationality or creed, each grade contains 50 lectures on various subjects. Students also have the opportunity to write in once a month with a list of questions to their allocated master. The Supreme Council wishes to make it quite clear that the members are not shackled to the order in any way, and absolute freedom does exist in membership, okay? But they say that students to sort of occult rack from which they can never escape in this world would be lifted, okay, from their mental slavery, okay? And that they would teach them the true meaning and true purpose of life, okay? And other mysteries would be revealed to the mind, okay? And I thought to myself, it's a whole lot of reading here, but the long and short of it is that they would actually go into this school and wish to learn the secrets of life that have been hidden from the masses, okay? They are unable to know their master. No one knows the master except for the supreme master. He's the only one who knows everyone and how they are connected. So I thought that that was quite interesting. There's a whole lot. I just kind of skipped through, some of the teachings. But again, that's called OHM, and that's short for Order of the Hidden Masters. Take a look at it, because my belief system is that they are indeed teaching about the Amanita muscaria mushroom, okay? And that the education one would receive, to become a supreme grand master theirself would just be them, going into these inner circles and councils and, learning about this and actually taking the mushroom to attain what one would call spiritual.